February 8th. Today is February 8th, 2022. This is the regular meeting of the Wellington Board of Education, and we are calling this meeting to order at 7:03 p.m.
And at this time, I would like to make a motion to reorder our new business and put point C above point A so that we discuss it prior to approving the minutes.
So point C under new business, the board attorney discussion about the meeting minutes. It might be more appropriate if you'd like to move the meeting minutes approval later rather than have it as part of, if that would be okay.
That's fine. So do you want to just move A behind C? It doesn't make a difference to me. I just want.
Yeah, because the minutes is more of a pro forma and it does make sense to have those two conversations. So we will move A to between C and D so that new business will now go budget approval, board attorney, approve meeting minutes, and then the school mask conversation.
Thank you. Do we need to vote on that?
We do. So if I'll make the motion so that we'll start forward, move to have the, well, actually you made the motion. It did not get a second yet. Is there a second on Donna's motion? And then we'll have a friendly amendment. Okay, Laura, you're seconding. I see your hand.
Yeah, I second.
Okay. And then if we're okay with that, we'll have a friendly amendment so that the meeting minutes goes after item C between the board attorney and the mask mandate conversation. Okay, all those in favor of moving that item of the minutes later in the agenda as noted, please signify by saying aye, raising your hand. Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, passes unanimously. We don't need to do a roll call vote. Okay, so starting back up to the top of the agenda, we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. You would join me, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Board of Education likes to start its meeting with time for the public to present their comments to us. We ask that you let us know that you're interested in speaking first by coming off of and onto the video. If not, there will be an opportunity for you to unmute yourself and speak at that point. We ask that you state your name and your address for the record, and please limit your comments to 3 minutes. We have a lot of people on the call today, so we ask if you could be even more succinct than that. We'd be able to have more people speak if possible. So we will be keeping track of time. If there's anyone now who'd like to speak, please wave at us on the video so we can see you and unmute you. Michelle.
There we go. I will speed read through this as quick as I can, so I apologize for any errors in advance, and if the note taker needs to see this, I do have it printed out if it's easier due to grammatical errors and everything else. I first want to express my disappointment in this board promoting and encouraging.
Excuse me, can you first identify yourself and where you live? Okay, yeah, thank you.
Michelle Christensen, Birch Meadow Lane. Right?
Thanks, Michelle. Go ahead. Yep.
Okay. I first want to express my disappointment in this board promoting and encouraging engagement with parents and community members when it seems like those residents and parents that are not in agreement with the majority are ignored or dismissed. The Board of Education should be bipartisan with the majority, but the majority seem to choose to not engage in that approach. I do want to thank Superintendent Stevens as he has engaged with me in most of my communications and concerns, specifically with regard to the well-being of my child. I look forward to hopefully seeing and hearing a more collaborative approach by all, working together to build a better future for our children. I would like to read parts of my emails to the Board of Ed from the November meeting that Ms. Cook has referenced the past 2 meetings. These emails will be read by myself and my husband and have been severely altered due to time constraints, unfortunately losing important comments and information. It seems several board members acknowledged Ms. Cook's concerns regarding the low test scores. However, they were also dismissive and trying to invalidate them instead of trying to see those concerns objectively. My husband and I took some time to look at the CT Ed site numbers as Ms. Cunningham had suggested. It is hard to have faith when you have people on the board and curriculum review arguing the data in the positive light when the numbers speak otherwise. I realize a small number of children can swing these scores. However, it seems easier to help those smaller groups of children with the needs they may have. A few members came across as frustrated that someone could view the schools as anything but excellent. While there is a lot of time, effort, and hard work of many people, especially the faculty trying to implement a new curriculum, it's going to take 3 years for the full curriculum to be implemented. I also agree with Ms. Cook to the question, wondering why did the school choose to reinvent the wheel instead of looking at or adopting curriculum from a neighboring district such as Mansfield and Coventry, both of which are significantly more successful in their scores. There is a potential that 3 more classes lost a lot of critical and valuable time for better learning and academic outcomes. It seems to be a very large investment with very high risk for students and faculty. Superintendent Stevens mentioned a part of the curriculum methods being put into use in our schools showed improvement in Mississippi. However, I still must ask, why are we not looking to our successful neighbors versus out of state? A few additional comments that were not in my email. I don't think test scores are everything, and as there are a lot of factors that come into play, however, I still stand by the disappointment in what I'm seeing and hearing. Wellington's per pupil expenditure is one of the highest, if not the highest, in our DIRG. I would think those smaller groups of students that really need the help are getting what they need, but I've heard and witnessed this is not happening. Students and families are being failed by being denied help where it's clearly needed. Where are the parents to turn? How does this help shape students for their future while in school and beyond? Why have such high per pupil expenditure if putting those dollars to best use isn't happening for the children? I recently learned science and social studies are not being taught all year long. How could one think this is a good idea for our kids? Are parents being listened to when they express their disappointment and frustrations over this? Is there a potential resolution? And just a quick side note, on the survey results, can raw data be shared with parents on the recent survey that was done and voted on by the board to implement half days for the next 1.5 years? Data such as numbers of return answers and any additional comments that may have been similar amongst parents. I've heard many parents are upset by the fact this past when more educational time is being taken away from students when they need it the most. One of the board members mentioned other districts have some similar schedules, such as South Windsor, which was mentioned. After reaching out to a few friends in that district, they do have half days on Wednesdays for a part of the year. While it is a minuscule sample size, it is highly disliked and causes a lot of financial and childcare trouble for families. And just because other districts do it doesn't mean it's what's best for those students and families in our district. After watching these Board of Ed meetings and then completing the survey, it seems the survey was quite deceiving if you listen to the meetings. The survey seemed to point to needing these extra days due to the pandemic, but when listening to the meetings, it seemed as though the extra time due to the steeper learning curve of the new curriculum. I'm not sure which it is, and while I'm in support of providing teachers time needed, but at what expense to the students and their families? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Christensen. Others who'd like to speak? Julie Marshall? Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Julie Marshall. I'm on Fisher Hill Road. I am signed in today and speaking because we are going to be discussing the mask mandate, and I'm extremely concerned about the fact that we may be removing masks from the schools. We are in a place right now where we have a preschool program in our schools, and many of those children are not yet eligible for the vaccine. This means that if we remove masks, all of those kids will be at risk. It would be irresponsible and unacceptable to put them at that risk. There is no longer a remote option for those of us who have that concern for our 4-year-olds and 3-year-olds who are at school. So that means that the option is to keep them home where they will fall behind and have no education, or to send them to school where they are at extreme risk because other people may be choosing not to wear masks. So I am here in support of continuing the masks because we have children at very high risk in the school building right now.
Thank you, Ms. Marshall. Others who'd like to speak? Peter, did I see your hand? Okay. I believe Peter Latinsk is on the iPhone-F4. I think you have to take him off mute, Phil, if you can.
I asked him to unmute.
Okay, Peter, if you can hear us, if you'd like to speak, you have to choose to come off mute. You were just offered that. Okay, we'll come back to you, Peter. Other folks who'd like to speak? If you are currently off, oh, Arthur Christensen, I see your hand.
Hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I'd like to continue what my wife said in regards to her email. Just please note that what I'm reading here doesn't convey the full picture, as I can't provide graphs in how I'm speaking. However, the graphs are available to anybody who wants to see them. The numbers
If
are
you would
pulled from
also
the
identify yourself and your location, please. Thank you.
Arthur Christensen, 14 Birch Meadow Lane.
Thank you.
These graphs and these numbers are pulled from the Connecticut EdSite website, which was recommended by the Board of Education. I've heard many people argue that Willington performs above the state average, but after looking at the state average, the bar is quite low, and as a parent, not okay by me. In fact, that average isn't even up to the state's own minimum standards. Only looking at it on a state level, though, really seems to be doing a disservice and is more of a manipulation of the data available. Since there was a mention of DERGs, I thought it would be a good place to compare, so I compared Group E, which Willington is a part of. I went ahead and did the averages for the K through 8 schools, and Willington is the lowest amongst the towns of Willington, Ashford, and Coventry. In the 2018-2019 school year, Willington scored the lowest in 4 out of 6 categories, including a 66.6 in science, 67.35 in math, and 70.2 in English, all of which have a state target goal of 75 out of 100. Since we merged with Mansfield at the high school level, I thought it was also a good idea to compare Willington to Mansfield, despite being in separate DERG categories. I want to know my child is receiving a good, solid education before they meet their peers in high school. Since Mansfield has 3 elementary schools, I once again took the average. Our K through 4 students are the most concerning, given this is the beginning and a very critical time of their education. And Willington scored below Mansfield in every single K through 4 category available. In 2018 to 2019 school year, the SPI testing categories, Mansfield scored an 80.83 in English compared to Willington's 70.2, and Mansfield scored a 78.43 in math, while we scored a 66.6. Both of those scores are above the state target for Mansfield, but once again, below the state target for Willington. One final view of Willington that I find startling is the significant drop of scores from the 2017-18 school year to the 2018-19 school year. 4 out of 5 categories had a drop, including a 3.6 point drop in English and a 4.5 point drop in math. This may not appear to be significant on the surface, but those drops bring our numbers even further below state targets than they already were. As this is the largest state data available in 2018-2019, as of the largest state data available in 2018-2019, Willington does not meet the state targets in any current category. Was there something that happened in the school during this time? Any changes in classroom level, staffing, or some other reasonable explanation? Several Board of Education members seem to want to dismiss these grave concerns being brought forward with excuses or not complete acknowledgement of the numbers. I'm sure many parents are worried. Others may want to focus on what they can do to help in the next few years. Others say the new curriculum will fix these numbers, but that's going to take at least 3 years to implement. And by looking at these numbers, can these kids afford to wait that long? I don't view these test scores as a failure on any student or teacher. I see this as the students and faculty being failed by the district and those in charge. Over the years, the schools have reduced teachers, expanded classroom size, and limited additional help to students that need it. Could that be contributing to the downward test scores? Our children and parents deserve to be heard, whether you agree with those views or not. We should not be dismissed or ignored, but it's quite worrisome and incredibly unhelpful when there are members of the Board of Education and the curriculum committee that are dismissive of the concerns of parents and fellow board members. I look forward to hearing and learning more about ways to better our children's education with more objective and constructive commentary. Thank you.
Thank you. Peter, I see you on the screen again and you're waving. We will try to unmute you. We have to ask you to unmute and there's probably a button you have to click. So look on your phone and see if there's something that says unmute.
It says I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
We can, even though it shows that you are muted, but we can hear you. So go ahead, please,
Right,
again,
right.
identify yourself and your location, please.
Certainly. Peter Lutencich, 97 Trask Road. Normally, I would come to this meeting to share some inputs. I know you're acting on your budget tonight, but I have a much larger concern this evening that takes precedence, and that is that I understand you received a letter from a townsperson, Michelle Christensen. I was attempting to access the content of that, but it's not in your public record. And I'm puzzled by this. I've served on the Board of Finance, the Board of Education, Planning and Zoning, and multiple committees in towns over the past 35 years. And it's customary for us to enter letters we receive from the people we represent in the record. And I don't understand why that's not the case here. I see on your agenda tonight that you have Kay present, as well as correspondence from your attorney. I certainly hope it is not the intent of this board not to allow access to our board via communication from the townspeople, and encourage you to please place Ms. Christensen's letter into the record. And I would assume any other communication you would receive from our townspeople. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there others who wish to speak? Again, if you're interested in speaking, it helps us if you are able to come onto the video. So to start the video and we can see your hand raised. Sarah Baker, I see you've raised your hand. Thank you. Are we able to unmute her? There we go. Please identify yourself and where you live, please.
Hi, yes. This is Sarah Baker, 7 Ridgewood Road. So I am here also to talk about the mask mandate. My concern is more of process than anything else, just to make sure that we don't rush into decisions. And this is the timing on all of this is rather poor. The announcement from the government, the timing of board meetings. We haven't had a lot of time to, I think, gather feedback from the community before any decisions are made. And I think there's a lot of very valid perspectives, but I think we need to take the time before any changes are made. I think it makes sense to take the time, get feedback from the parents, the staff, the students, and the Department of Public Health, and then make a choice for our community and make sound policies for the community after we've gone through a process with everyone. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Others who wish to speak? I thought I saw Mr. Clark with his hand raised, but now I don't see you on the screen. No. Okay, I do see you on the screen, but you're not on video. Are you interested in speaking, Mr. Clark? Yes? Okay, if we would take his mute off. There you go. Please identify yourself and your location.
Matthew Clark, 42 Burt Latham Road. My hope is that a member of the Board of Education tonight will make a motion to attach this correspondence from Michelle Christensen to the minutes, so that the people of Wilmington will have the benefit of looking at the charts and other information in there. She put a lot of time into it. I think it's only fair that it be included in the minutes in the correspondence. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there others? Again, you can, under reactions, you can raise your hand that way, or you can come onto the screen on the video and wave your hand. Okay, I think everyone else is just watching. Okay, so we will move on to the next point on the agenda, which is the chairman's report. The only thing that I want to report is just to remind people that at a previous meeting, we had discussed the need to have a special meeting, a budget, not a budget, a special workshop that would not follow our more rigid meetings with only parents and others able to speak at the beginning and end, but to have an actual dialogue. around our performance of our students at a later date this year. It is something that we are considering. So I do want to recognize that we have heard that and have talked about that. But for right now, we are trying to get through the budget season and through some otherwise difficult health decisions that we're going to have to make. So that is something that after the Board of Education is able to put together a date, we will let the public know that we will be having that conversation. And rather than having it be just a meeting where the Board of Ed discusses amongst itself, we will have a presentation on those scores and then a discussion about it. So that is coming later this year, but not anytime in the next month. So I just wanted to call your attention to that was discussed at an earlier meeting, maybe December. I don't think it was January, but we've had so many meetings this month, it's hard to remember. So that's it for the chairman's report right now. Let's move on to communications.
We just had those two communications, one from Attorney Chris Cheney and one from Patrice McCarthy from CABE, which are both on the agenda later on.
Okay. So we'll move on to the next item, which is a presentation on the curriculum overview.
So before we start tonight, and really before we start putting curriculum in front of the entire board for approval, the committee thought it would be beneficial for Erin Conley, who's our Director of Curriculum Instruction, to really just to provide some background information and show a shortened sample for context. We shortened one section just for demonstration. The actual unit is significantly longer, but it was easier just to shorten it for the presentation. Erin's going to provide a brief presentation tonight, and then we will be releasing a portion of the K-8 language arts curriculum to the entire board later this week. And it's just a portion. It's the fall, it's the spring version, K-8 ELA, and you're going to see a sample of that tonight. And so the curriculum that's going to be released has already been reviewed by the committee. And so they're ready for approval on it, but thought that tonight would be, before we release it, to give you a little background information. So I am going to share my screen here. And then Erin, you will get to take over.
All right.
Just a note before you start that Board of Ed members, if you are on unmuted at the moment, you can mute and unmute yourselves. The board members have that control over your own muting. So if there's going to be background noise, if you would please mute yourself. Thank you.
All right. Well, good evening, everybody. Over the last few meetings, there's also been a couple of questions that have come up around curriculum. So different discussions that we've had, I've tried to embed some answers or guidance in this presentation as well around some things that have popped up. So we'll talk about some of those things as well. But just starting as a general overview, what curriculum is and what it is not. So curriculum really is a standards-based sequence of experiences encompassing tangible copies of papers or books, but also, it could be a field trip or place-based or any kind of experience where students are trying to become proficient in those standards and learning skills. Curriculum is the central guide for educators around what is essential for teaching and learning so that every student has access to rigorous and relevant academic experiences. What that really is talking about in that last line is that, again, this is a guide for educators in a way to differentiate and ensure that all kids, no matter where they are getting those rigorous experiences and to help them reach their potential and the standards that we have at each grade level. Curriculum is not specifically a curriculum core book or text. And often that is the largest misconception around curriculum, where people think, especially, teachers might be given a guide. That is what we would call a major curriculum resource. So for example, in Willington, teacher's workshop is actually a major curriculum, one of our major curricular resources. It is not our actual curriculum. So just want to clarify that it is not one particular textbook, course, material, or video, or worksheet. It's actually a culmination that help us reach those standards-based experiences. And what it does is it provides those knowledge and skills the students are expected to learn. And so you'll see that as we look at a unit, you'll see that those are very targeted both at a big level in the larger overview and at a lesson level and more of a daily lesson overview. It is not designed for the public. And I want this to also be important as you guys review the curriculum, that these are documents designed to guide teachers. So they're written with, teacher language. So just, as you read, understand that lens as well. And curriculum is not concrete. So we have this written curriculum, but understand that we do as teachers and educators need to reflect on the students sitting in front of us. And that is a huge component of how we adapt the curriculum, different influences such as policy expectations, and then new learning. As you know, we're transitioning and embedding science of learning, but this is huge new learning that just came out from research around how we read and how our brain thinks around reading. So curriculum is ever changing. It is a living document. And it is not just a written document. It does encompass, as you see, I'm doing the written piece currently, but the teachers really bring it alive. So there's the written part of the curriculum, the taught curriculum, and the assessed curriculum, all which make up the total sum of what we call curriculum. So I embedded this slide in here because there's been, I kept bringing up the word pedagogical shifts and the pedagogy shifting. This slide gets at that. So I know when I went to school and was sitting in the classroom, my educational experience really looked more like the old curriculum where the teacher spoke to us. It was really around learning knowledge, memorizing information, because I didn't have the internet in my elementary school. So, we really had to rely on our memories. But you'll see that the shift really changes from information not changing and education becoming around knowing to really more critical thinking. So understanding that information is constantly changing because we're learning new stuff along the way. Education is for understanding rather than memorization as we get older, and just really taking around students and teaching us to think. How do we think? How do we critically think? How do we work with others? So it's a lot more of those skill sets. The skill sets are shifting. So hence the way teachers are teaching is shifting. A lot more community involvement, project-based learning. You've heard me bring that up, which you can see really encompasses this new curriculum. But did want to give kind of that a sampling because I've been talking about pedagogical shifts as to this kind of gives you the why behind why we have to shift that pedagogy. Each document standards. So we've been talking about standards. Connecticut uses the Connecticut Common Core State Standards, which is really the national state Common Core State Standards with a little bit of a Connecticut spin. And I'm going to pull up the ELA standards specifically because we're going to be reviewing ELA curriculum. But know that each curricular in ELA, there's 6, you can see them over here on the side, 6 subsets of ELA standards. They fall under reading literature, which is abbreviated with an RL, reading informational text, which is an abbreviation of RI, reading foundational skills, which is RF, writing, W, speaking and listening, SL, language, L. And so in the document, you'll see these abbreviations. So for example, you might see RL.3.1. That means that standard is reading literature, a grade 3 standard, and it's standard number 1. So just so you understand what each piece of that abbreviation is. Additionally, Phil, if you could pull up one of the progressions, either. So additionally, we linked these in here because this is, I know Anne has asked this a few times around what is the progression, and a couple other parents I think asked this too, is you can see here the reading literature standard, key ideas and details, which is standard number 1. You can see the progression on there from kindergarten all the way up to what it looks like to 5th grade and how it builds upon itself each year. So if you're interested in kind of digging a little deeper into each particular standard and what it looks like at each grade level, this is a great document. And there's one linked for K-5 and then another one linked for 6 through 12. And they do go standard by standard. This is also a great resource for parents. So if you're curious as to a grade level and what they're expected to do for a particular standard or for a particular thing, this is a great resource document. All right, and so that's pretty much sums up the standards. There is the last page of this is actually a parent resource document with a bunch of links, which brings you to other links around standards too. We'll go over that in a minute. Another question that's come up in both curriculum committee and I believe in a Board of Ed meeting is around, the topic and theme. So I'm going to give you a kindergarten example, but there will be a full scope and sequence for reading and writing at every grade level, which will look similar to this. So you can see in kindergarten that there's 4 reading units and 4 writing units. And every grade looks very similar, where in writing, they go through each genre. So they get persuasive unit, they get an opinion unit / argumentation up at the upper level levels, persuasion. So they go through each genre, informational, and then reading very similar also. The reading and writing units are very much tied together. So when a grade is doing let's say an informational unit in writing, they're reading nonfiction and informational as well, so that it really ties together. And each grade level looks very similar. Glossary of terms. We are going to, as we publish curriculum, there will be a much more robust glossary of terms available, but just wanted to give a simple glossary of terms as we look at the sample unit that we're going to present in just a minute. Priority standards. Priority standards are represent the student competencies that need to be reached to help every student learn and demonstrate proficiency in by the end of the grade or course. Supporting standards are the standards that support, connect to, or enhance the priority standards. So a priority standard, and I actually will point one out in the unit, but a priority standard often is either more encompassing and is supporting a little bit more specific, or sometimes in that particular unit, a priority standard is just hit a whole lot or hit very deeply, and a supporting standard you need to be able to do before you be able to show mastery of the priority standard. So sometimes it's a stepping stone, and sometimes it's just kind of a more specific discrete skill set. Students SWABAT, you'll see a lot, but that really is just abbreviations for students will be able to. So it's just to shorten the objective so that it's not 10 words. So whenever you see those letters, it just stands for students will be able to. And letters, you've heard us talk about a lot, which is a training, but it is also the teacher guides. We use a lot of the resources in that in our curriculum document as well. And that stands for Language Essentials for Teaching Readers and Teachers of Reading and Spelling Training Program for Teachers. And this is really building the capacity of teachers in the science of reading. So those are the main terms you'll need to know as we go through. All right, so let's review a unit. And just to reiterate what Superintendent Stevens said, we did pare this down so that just for clarity, this is not an entire unit for a grade. We cut out a whole bunch of lessons just to kind of give you a snapshot of what each section looks like. So every unit, no matter what subject area, will open with a description of the unit. So this gives you the overview of what the entire unit will be kind of hitting throughout, but a very high level overview, an umbrella overview. The second part is the standards. And here, this is where you'll see both priority and supporting. So the priority standards are bolded and the supporting not bolded. And I would, so I'm just trying to look for a quick, okay, so let's just for priority and supporting. So RL 3.5, which refers to parts of stories, dramas, and poems when writing and speaking about a text. And it's asking the children to use terms such as chapter, scene, stanza. So this could be an example. And I know I just did this in one of the units, just not sure it was this one. But if students for the priority standards are asked to provide evidence, and describe characters in a story providing evidence, there is a very they're likely going to have to use the term chapter. The character in this chapter and have to give evidence using the terminologies and referencing parts of that. So that's just an example of how you need that supporting standard to reach that priority standard. But this section, and then you'll see again, RL, reading literature, grade 3, standard 1, RL 3.1, just to reiterate, you'll see those there. The next section goes through the resources on the left side, and the resources are broken down into the teacher's primary resources. So those are the teacher resources they need to look at or pull up, and then the mentor texts. So the texts. So those are either read alouds or text for the children to guide them through this process. But the mentor texts are more children-based. Teacher resources are for the teachers. On the right side are the routines and procedures. So as using the workshop model, you'll see down below, the reader's workshop has a very specific process and structure to it, and that is outlined there with a mini lesson, the conferring in small group, and then a share. And then each of those is broken down further into the kind of those discrete components. And then above, we have the close read procedures, which is the structured read. The close read procedure has a first read, a second read, and a third read, each one with a specific focus, which you'll see in a minute as well. This section right here is the unit or general umbrella overview. So it tells you, and here you'll see that we highlighted there, it's that high level overview of the unit. So in this unit, the two, I think there's two, I can't see the bottom, but the major questions that the kids are investigating in this unit are how do readers walk in character shoes, and how do readers build theories about characters. You'll see the big ideas answer those questions. So that's at the end of this unit, those are our big goals. We want the students to be able, to understand that readers try to empathize or walk in a character's shoes by paying close attention to how characters talk and act, and identifying character traits and how they impact their actions. Standards that are attached or that they have to utilize to accomplish this essential question and big idea are listed just by their abbreviations. And then all the different forms of assessment that will take place throughout the unit to ensure that kids get these essential questions and big ideas are listed. Assessments are broken down into formative, summative, and diagnostic. Formative is really the observation, quick, in the moment, I can assess where they're at and change my instruction accordingly. Summative is we've taught an entire unit, and now we want to assess to see how much they absorb from that at the end of the unit. So formative is really in the moment, constantly adjusting. Summative is more, we've taught something longer term and we're assessing now how much they've retained and understood. And then diagnostic is, let's say we give an assessment. So iReady is a great example. So iReady, we just gave our benchmark. We might see that a student scored really low in their phonics. So we need to dig a little deeper because phonics is a huge thing. So what a part of their phonics are they not understanding? Do they not understand different vowel combinations? Do they have that and they're not understanding syllabication? So we need to go and figure out diagnostically what pieces we need to target with those specific children. And so that's what we mean when we say diagnostic assessments. Those are the digging deeper. And here's another essential question for this one is how do readers grow and learn lessons alongside the characters in the books they read? And you'll see the big idea right next to there and the standards. So this is really this is the day-to-day. This is what the teacher is going to pick up and use as their guide day to day. And you'll see the essential questions are the big questions from above. So we're weaving those in so the teachers know where and what their larger focus is. And then the student learning objectives. So again, here's that SBAT, which is students will be able to. So the objective for this lesson, this is structured reading, but is to identify character traits by paying attention to patterns of behavior. And I'm going to go a little deeper on structured reads down below. So I'm going to skip a few lines to kind of the last line you see here, which is how do readers build theories about characters. The objective for this right here is that the students will be able to identify story elements and explain how they contribute to the story. And you'll see the next block, which is character studies session 1. That tells the teacher what is the resource they're using to help students accomplish this objective. So they're using the book Character Studies from Teachers College Workshop, and they're reading session 1. And then the last column is assessing. How do the teachers know if they're able to identify story elements and explain how they contribute to the story? Where they're going to check for the story element chart. So the students will have completed a story element chart. They're going to look at the student jots, which are their notes while they're reading. They're usually post-it notes or notes in a notebook. And they're going to conference. They're going to conference with their peers and the teacher, and both the peers will have notes around what they're discussing, and teachers will have notes around how, if they were able to identify the story elements and explain how they contribute to the story. So those are all examples of formative assessments in the moment, at the end of a lesson, and giving the teacher information on what to do next, if they need to reteach or if they're able to move on to the next session. But that is one lesson. And you'll see, we just, go ahead, you can go scroll, Phil. You'll see we just gave you a few more examples. Again, we only put 3 sessions there. Know that on average, the workshop units have around 17 to 20 sessions in them. So that's our abbreviated version, just so you know that. And here's an example of a structured shared reading. So this is one series. So this is one full run through of the 3 reads, which you saw the procedure above. The first read is around comprehension. You'll see here the book title that this, I have to do a shout out. I know I've done this in every meeting, but I do another shout out for Kristen Stevens. She is a phenomenal book picker. Not only does she have a great ELA background, but she has done a phenomenal job of really bringing in the world and social studies, science, different topics, really bringing it in through literature. These are amazing texts that we're bringing in through these structured reads. This one is Emmanuel's Dream by Laurie Ann Thompson and Sean Quayles, and it's around a boy, and I forget where it takes place. Oh, Ghana, who has he was born with missing one leg, but it's actually a true story. And he actually does, I believe it's a bicycle. He bikes across the country and raises a bunch of awareness for disabled people. And he is actually a national hero. So it's truly a great story. But you'll see the purpose that they're focused here on is identifying character traits by paying attention to patterns of behavior. And I link as much as I can around background knowledge to build both the teacher and the students' kind of schema and thinking before they read the story. And again, what the kids are trying to answer in this first read is, how would you describe Emmanuel based on how he dealt with his challenges and issues? So again, thinking about his traits and how they impact his behaviors. So you'll see the connection from the purpose to the question. Then during the reading talk, usually will give you kind of the teacher kind of snippets about what they could focus on or say. Here they're looking at the retell questions and prompts from letters. And then they're at the suggested activity, which is the after reading. And this particular one is, filling out the chart around how he dealt with his challenges and issues. And then really going back to that initial question. The second read is around vocabulary. It's always focused on vocabulary building. Sometimes it's around morphology, word work, looking at roots, suffixes, prefixes, and sometimes it's simply around learning new words. It could be a subject specific word, and sometimes it's just words, vocabulary building in general. So in this particular one, you can see there's different sentence stems to talk about the vocabulary on the different pages. And then really looking at the term disabled. So the activity is looking at, it says, Emmanuel says on page 19 that being disabled does not mean you're unable. So that's a great word work, right? Thinking of the prefix dis versus un. And so the answering, how does Emmanuel's actions demonstrate this? And how does his mother support this belief? So really looking at the word, the meaning, and bringing it back to character traits. And the final read is always around author's craft, because we want kids to examine mentor authors and then apply this craft in their own writing. So this particular lesson, they're looking at trying to identify a moral or lesson in a story and what craft the author uses to get that lesson or moral across. So they really close read each different pages. And then at the end, they are watching a video of the real Emmanuel, talking about his experience and, asking again, what do you think the lesson or moral of the story is, especially after you meet the man? And then applying their knowledge. So thinking about a time they had to persevere through a difficult time and how they got through it, what they used as motivation. So that is it. So that's the end of the structured reads. And so that is a very brief and condensed version of a reading unit, but you did get a sample of all of the pieces. And the final piece of this presentation are around parent resources. So I've included a few right here. So Common Core state standards, That link takes you to a very the landing page of the standards. So it really walks you through how to read them. You can go to the right to look at English language arts or math standards. When you do click on those, yep, perfect. You can see they're done by grade. So you can go right into the particular grade you're looking for, and it goes into the subcategories of each. So math, different math subcategories, and then reading will go into the 6 categories you saw earlier. And then within each of those, they go down to standard, the numbers, which you saw earlier as well. I also, for our major curriculum resources, I linked illustrative math support. So K 6 through 8 already has this. So you'll see there's links here, and actually there's links here for students, there's links for families, and then there's links also for educators. And if you are, you'll see them, they're also in Spanish. So they are offered in both English and Spanish, but so for family materials, and that will help you help students. So if there's a concept we learned very differently with math. So if there's a concept you're not sure what it looks like in teaching today, you can look in here, and it should provide some parent supports on how to support your children. And then the science of reading. So you've heard us talk about the science of reading. So I wanted to link. So here is it's a primer for parents to understand when we talk about the science of reading, what does that mean? And what does it look like? So I love the kind of question and answer approach this page took. I thought it was pretty straightforward. So I linked that there. So, what is the science of reading? What theories or schools of thoughts are commonly used today around reading? But this gives you the background on why we're shifting and including the science of reading and kind of what the research has told us around it. And then the last one is reading and writing workshop. So this is the link for the reading and writing project, and specifically supports for families. You'll hear, I just as parents, if you happen to speak education or talking about ELA, English language arts, there's a big, just for clarity, a lot of districts are either workshop or science of reading. And I want you to understand that, because a lot of times you might go into the workshop and read about workshop and you'll hear things that may not be aligned with science of reading, and vice versa. That is why, and to be honest, research really, when you look at it's the whole language versus the phonics, and really, we really truly need both. So what we're doing here in Willington is truly what needs to happen. We're using the best of both worlds and combining them to make a full, to really get the best of both worlds and get a full picture in our English language arts curriculum. And so those are parent resources linked there.
Thanks, Erin. That was really comprehensive for just a sample. I'm sure we're going to have more than we can possibly have time to read in great depth, but certainly enough for us to look over and explore throughout. So we'll look forward to getting that later this week.
Thanks.
Are there any specific questions that folks on the board have for Brianna? Anne, I see your hand, and then Donna, I see your hand.
Erin, how can we and the parents access all of those links that you highlighted?
Great question, Phil.
You're gonna get that. So you're gonna get a copy of the presentation. We're also gonna put it on the website so that you'll be able to see all of those links live. You'll be able to access them. We just want to make sure that the document is locked down on the PDF, so everything is live. So you'll get a live copy of it so they can access everything that's there.
Okay, thank you.
Donna?
Yeah, I have several questions. So I'm gonna take my hand down. One is, could you just give me a quick example what a community-based learning is?
Yep. So, and I'm going to give you an example from my past. So I had in Providence, when I was in Providence, there was a, or actually, no, let me give you one from Norwich because it's more local. So in Norwich, we were having a problem with the reservoir and the water. And so I actually called the public utility company and asked if our 5th graders could work alongside them, because we were actually studying environmental impacts. And so they actually did the water study alongside the public utility company. And then the students worked as a class to try to solve a problem. And actually what they did was build a floating island, which cleaned the water. There was a whole issue with the water samples and the toxicity of the water and different. And so they worked with, again, so really learned a whole bunch, but also really gave back the community. So they were working with a community partner. They were working on a problem in the community, and they did it. They actually had to use science, math, English language arts, and social studies, because they actually looked at kind of the time period and the evolution of that area as well. So it was very integrated, but just an example of a community-based project.
And that sounds really exciting. And then what about a criterion-based assessment?
So, oh, you're talking about the slide?
Yeah, I just want to make sure I understand exactly what they are.
Yeah. So the criteria base is really more of like the performance, and norm reference is when they're comparing to other students within I'm actually having the, you forgot the wording. So like the iReady is norm referenced. So I'm trying to like forget the wording here, but yeah, iReady is norm reference, where you're doing comparison to other students. And the criteria is where you're performing based on a criteria. So, they're provide, whether it's a rubric, whether it's the standards is a criteria, right? So you're performing up to a criteria versus in comparison to other people.
Okay. And then when you were talking about the Emmanuel's Dream book, is that something that is read to the students 3 times? Or is there books that they read themselves 3 times?
Well, both. So as a structured read, it is read aloud, but then they do in the second and third reads, and as they're doing suggested activities, they are reading it themselves. But in the workshop during those, they also have their own book. So there's a mentor text. So let's take character traits. There'll be a mentor text with a strong character that has strong character traits and actions because of their traits, which set the model. But then they all have individual books that they're reading, that they're doing this, they're applying their learning to. So they have both going on simultaneously.
Okay. And then is there a reason that they learn the vocabulary after versus before? I would think that they'd get more out of it if they at least, not necessarily memorized what the words were, but were a little bit more familiar with what the words meant and then heard them in the story versus not necessarily knowing what the words mean.
Yeah, so they do actually get it in the first. You'll see the vocabulary is listed in the first read. It's just a deeper dive in that second. It's like they're really going deeper into the meaning. They do some extra, so they're introduced to the word in the first read, but they're doing more activity based. So they're filling out, I don't know if that one has it, but the Freyer Foursquare, which they have to do examples and non-examples and different forms or of the word, like with or without an S or a plural form. So they have to go deeper doing different activities with the word in the second version, or the second read, I should say.
Thank you very much. It looks quite exciting.
You're welcome.
Herb? You'll have to take yourself off mute. Oh, Herb, you're still on mute. We can't hear you. There you go.
Okay.
Yep.
Erin, thank you very much for your presentation. It's very comprehensive and provided us with a lot of material. I look forward to seeing some of your additional curriculums that you develop with Michelle. I don't know whether we'll be able to have time to read them all, but in any event, all of the materials that are provided for in the reading program, I think at one point you mentioned that students set up objectives as a result of their reading and so forth, and you had a formative assessment. Do you have any other, besides that, do you have any other evaluations of the students' progress and in this area?
So Yeah, so just to walk through the process. So the lesson, I think you're speaking to the lesson objectives and the assessing of those through the more formative, whether it's observation, whether they're filling out an exit ticket, whether they're creating, you're looking at their notes. But then additionally, at the end of each, well, throwing another term out for workshop, but bend. So kind of think of it like a chapter focus. But that end of each bend, there is a for in writing, they have to publish a piece, reflect on their learning and set new learning goals. And there's usually, and then at the end of every unit, there's a huge celebration and share where there's some kind of public component, whether it be digital or school-based or class-based. So, and again, there's rubrics for those. So those are more of your, what we would call summative assessments. And then going a little even bigger, that's when you get to your benchmark. You get your eye ready to see what they've retained over even longer periods of time.
So you have rubrics that accompany this program.
Yep. And checklists, lots of checklists and rubrics.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? I think everybody else is on the curriculum committee and has seen it already. So,
right?
Okay. Then we'll move on to what's next on the agenda, which is the superintendent report. Thank you, Aaron.
Mine's dull compared to Aaron's presentation, sorry. So the my 2021 or 21-22 update, this is the largest number I've had to report to you. We had 80 cases. We had over 80 cases since your last meeting. It's a lot of COVID cases. The nurses are continuing to distribute the COVID tests that we received. We're getting more COVID tests in. If there's any families that need a COVID test for a child, we are distributing those. We're sending out many every day. So they've been very helpful in identifying any illness quickly. And obviously, despite the number of COVID cases that we've had, we've been able to continue educating students. It's not been easy. Sometimes there's people doing double duty as far as staffing goes, but our administrative team has made it work. Our teachers have made it work, and I'm thankful for that. And a little shift of just the 21-22 update, just to give you an update on CIP. At this point, both of the projects that are in year one, the sidewalk replacement projects at both buildings, are still in year one of the CIP plan as it stands today. They're still working on that. But I will tell you that their committee moved the air conditioning for the band room into a potential ARPA item. And the ARPA item is what comes out of the selectman's office, that 11-person committee. They have money there and they're considering that as one of the options. Obviously, if it doesn't happen there, it would be bumped out in a later year on the plan. So that's real simple update. As far as enrollment goes, Center School currently has 206 students and Hall School has 187. We have 393 students, and that obviously does not include the students that are outplaced as of today. As far as staffing goes, we're close to fully staffed. We're still not there, but we're close. We had two part-time paraprofessionals resign, Andy St. Jean and Chrissy Seneschal. Andy took a position that was significantly closer to her home. Fully understand that move. And Chrissy Seneschal is actually studying to be a pediatrician. So goals in life, you do your paraprofessional work. That's what she was doing, that to make sure she had experiences with kids, and she's into her coursework. So two individuals that, we had part-time positions for them and working with them just to keep them here and working with students with special needs. And they'll be missed for sure. We did hire a full-time person, Danielle Cromack, to replace them. And Danielle's actually a prior student of one of our administrators and a Talon native. So welcome to Danielle. The last item that's on there is the insurance claim. I have a little more detail on this and just wanted to share kind of where we're at. As you know, we had a pipe freeze in the preschool room at Center School. And then subsequently, we had a pipe freeze in the gym as a secondary effect. So I'm still working with Kerma. It's our insurance provider But here are the details so far. We have 2 classrooms that will receive full tile removal and replacement. We have 1 classroom that's going to have full tile and carpet removal and replacement, so the entire room. We have a temporary heating unit that's going to be put into the preschool room because there's no functioning heating unit in there other than a portable unit. The entire hallway has asbestos. So that entire hallway is going to need an abatement project. Let her in. And so that entire project, it'll basically remove the asbestos, the tile that's underneath the carpet, will tear out the carpet, and new carpet would be installed. The good news is ServPro did samples all over, and they reported that there's no asbestos in the classrooms. So that's good news. The repairs to the heating units in the gym and the preschool will be covered under insurance. The furniture and materials that were ruined are also covered. I will tell you that our preschool team has been doing double duty, making lists, identifying items that were ruined, taking pictures for insurance, and making a list of things to reorder. I think the reward is getting the things back in new condition, but it's been a lot of work. So thanks to that preschool team. The cost of the district so far is approximately $18,000. That's out of pocket. That includes $13,000 for the asbestos abatement. Asbestos abatement is not included in your insurance policy, and $5,000, approximately $5,000 in deductibles. We also have 2 air scrubbers. They're portable filtration system. They're just small units that are in the hallway in the classrooms. They improve air quality, and they help with mold in case anything is still wet underneath the tile. Ironically, they also help remove viruses. So it's kind of helpful to have in the spaces right now. We are working with ServPro. That is the company that came out and rescued us that first night. And some of their subcontractors and MCOR on the timeline, which is it's impacted because of just getting materials. As you know, shortage of materials kind of throughout and trying to get them. And so we're no different. So we're shooting for April vacation at this point. We were hoping for February break next Friday that they were going to be able to blast through some work. It's just not going to happen because of materials. So I talked to them today. We're working on April vacation for all of that work over those days. So asbestos abatement, tile tear up, carpet coming out. There will be painting that will be happening, and that's what's covered under the insurance policy. So right now, cost to the district is about $18,000, and my suggestion will be, don't do anything right now. Leave it alone until we get closer to the end of the year to see if we have the funds for it. If we don't have the funds for it, then we would have to go and ask for additional funds. But I'm going to do whatever I can where there's some savings in the budget, whether it's insurance or something else, to cover the cost within the budget. Questions about my superintendent's report?
Okay, I'm not seeing any hands. Oh, there we are. Herb, thank you.
Phil, can you tell us, you've been permitted to tell us how many students were involved in the 80 cases and how many staff members were involved?
I don't have that information with me, but it's both. That's a combination of students and staff member, and I don't know the number off the top of my head, Herb, to be honest with you.
Okay, seeing no other questions, we will move on to item 8, which is our February financial report.
I hate to say this, I think this is probably the simplest report for financial report I've had. There's minimal changes. I think it's because we've been working hard on budget and working hard on the flood items, but there's minimal changes this month in our accounts. I will tell you that I did just meet with the administrative team yesterday and went through the current budget to identify items that need to be purchased this year that, we're halfway through the school year. What do you still need to encumber for the year for supplies, for materials, for professional development, whatever those things are. The only highlight I think I'll share off the entire, all the programs, and you have the list there, is that we still do not have excess costs out of program 3, special ed. We don't have that excess cost reimbursement back yet. It's not encumbered. And currently one para is unencumbered. The person I just talked about hiring tonight, she doesn't show up yet in those dollars figures. So I anticipate maybe your next meeting, typically those dollars for the first round of excess costs come sometime in February or March. And so we may see that there's a bump in special ed next month. And then obviously the decrease of the para. Any questions about the financial report?
Bill, could you just put that on your screen and share it?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So again, this is where this program right here, excess costs we get, I mean, there's probably $100,000. So this looks really low for this time of year. And it's not.
And that's not unusual. That's not something that we get at the beginning of the year.
No, and again, across these accounts, sometimes, there's certain, it looks like there's, a lot of money. I mean, a lot of money, $30,000 is a lot of money in my eyes here in program 9. But there's several items that are in there that we know we're going to be spending it on because we're waiting for invoices for school choice. We just don't have the bills yet. So it goes down. We just don't encumber those things until we know.
Did I see your hand, Herb? Go ahead.
Phil, in the transportation item, we have 9,000 left in the account. Is that going to be enough to get through the rest of the year? I know we've encumbered quite a bit. And is the increase in fuel, gasoline, going to have an impact on that number?
So yes and no. So yes, all of the, we will have enough money there to get through the end of the year. All of the entire transportation contract with M&J is encumbered. So it's already out of that balance remaining. And
Right.
then she's already encumbered the fuel cost as well. Ironically, the fuel that we're paying for right now is what we had locked in on our dream lock-in of like $1.65 last year. So that's what we're paying right now. We're not paying the going rate of whatever it is, $2.75 or something like that, which is our current, about the negotiated rate. So the reason I think you see some money left in here, to be honest with you, $9,000 is a little higher than I think we normally see this time of year, is because of sports. We didn't, if you see a game that's canceled, something like that, or there's a trip that's not taken that we had budgeted money for, there's some savings there. So there's a little bit of savings there, but yes, there will be enough money to get us through the end of the year.
Okay.
Any other questions on the financial report? Okay, seeing none, moving on to the committee report.
So I know Brenda was working today on trying to get a policy committee together. So if she reached out to you, please make sure you respond to her on that. The curriculum committee met. I think you can see that. I don't know if anybody wants to add anything to their curriculum committee meeting, but I think you saw the work tonight of what they just did last meeting. Does anybody want to add anything to that?
We do have the minutes of the meeting.
Yeah. They went through that first ELA unit that you're going to be seeing. And then again, the negotiations team for the West contract will start in March. The one thing I will say that's under committees is, remember, the entire board is the school building committee. You have your own school building committee that's separate, and you'll be doing ed specs. The school building committee, I don't know how to say that. The official school building committee just hired an owner's project manager. And so that person will be helping do ed specs. So I anticipate that we'll be trying to find a time for a special meeting that will just be around identifying, creating some ed specs for whatever project were to occur, if any. Okay,
Is that a meeting you expect to happen in the next month, Phil?
I do, just to at least get it going. And then I'll have a portion of the legwork to do.
Thank you. Okay, so moving on to new business. We moved the meeting minutes later, so we will start with the budget discussion, which had originally been on item B. So this is the Board of Education budget for 2022-23 school year.
Yep, so I have provided you the updates that we discussed last meeting. I sent it to you in an email. It just gave the updated program 9, all of it's highlighted in green. And then I also just updated the budget process page. So I don't know where you want to go from there, but that was the work that I had done.
Could you put those up on the screen, please?
Yes. So this was the program 9. This was moved down. Totals. And the overall, sorry if I'm making you dizzy. It's right there.
Okay, so seeing that we've already had multiple hours of meetings looking at and examining this budget in significant great detail, I want to thank you, Mr. Stevens, for making the edits that we had recommended the last time and highlighting them in a way we can find them easily on all of these pages. Does anyone have any specific questions about the budget now that we've seen it a few times? Herb?
Yeah, I want to thank the superintendent for putting this budget together. I think it will probably provide the students with the basic services that we really need in all of the programs. It didn't address some of the things that I had hoped for, but I think the administration has done the best that they can. I think the board is probably satisfied with what we have before us. The only other thing that I have is the increase in the budget is 3.86% now. I was hoping that it would be a little lower than that, get down around a little over 3% or at 3%, because the increase in dollars is about $345,712, and that's a substantial amount of money. I know we're only concerned with the budget. We're not concerned with the rest of well, we are concerned with the rest of the town budget because this impacts whatever increase is going to take place. And I was hoping that would be just a little lower. Those are the two things that I had in mind, Phil, in regard to the budget. I know you've done the best that you can, and I think most of us are pretty well satisfied. But I was hoping that we could get the increase down a little more. And I could go through the budget and micromanage and, lob off $100 here and $1,000 there, here and there on a few areas. But I don't. The only other thing that would help us would be reducing the staff. And we're not doing that. Matter of fact, staff is kind of increasing a little. So I will support the budget, but I have a feeling that, that there are certain things that we should be doing, but it's kind of impractical, and we just can't do it without affecting the programs, services that we're providing. Again, I want to thank you for what you have accomplished here.
Herb, would you like to make a motion? Was that a beginning of a motion, or was that?
Make a motion that we approve the Willing Public Schools Board of Ed. It will become a Board of Ed budget at this point for 2022 to 2023.
Do I have a second? Anne Grosjean has raised her hand. You're still on mute, Anne, but I did see you visually.
Okay, I second that motion.
Thank you. Always good to have both audio as well. Sometimes people are watching the recording, but more listening than watching the actual the waving on the screen. So we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion or questions before we move on?
You want to add the number in there, 9,307,721.
Herb?
What was that, Phil?
It's probably good to say the overall
Nope.
number.
The proposed budget is 9,307,721.
Thank you. Okay, then.
I have
Herb?
one further question.
Sure.
Phil, this is our budget, and we now present it to the Board of Finance. Is that it?
Yeah, so once you vote on it and once it's approved, it would become the Board of Education budget. And I'm glad to present it, or you can have Michelle present it, whatever you want to have that done.
I certainly plan on being at that meeting. I can't answer the questions the way Superintendent Stevens can, but I'm happy as the board's representative to be at that meeting and present the budget.
The motion doesn't include who's going to present it, but
I don't know that we ever have. I think that's more of a logistics issue and a matter of timing. But certainly know that both of us will be there for the presentation. if
Yeah,
that
I think if Phil presents it, and Michelle, you're there to support him.
I'm glad
helps. That's how it would have to go, since he has the details for sure. Okay, let's move to a vote. All those in favor of approving the 2022-2023 budget as presented. I can't repeat the number right now, but that is in the original motion. Signify by saying aye or raising your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
I'm opposed, Donna.
Okay, so we're going to have to do a roll call vote since it is not unanimous. So I'm just going to go through the screen and then we'll come back to that. So if all of the board members would take themselves off mute, so it'll come on the record. Donna, we'll start with you. Donna Cook,
No.
Herb Errico,
Yes.
Anne Grosjean,
Yes,
Tracy Anderson,
Yes.
Laura Rodriguez,
Yes.
Brianna Ross,
Yes.
and myself, Michelle Doucette Cunningham, yes. Motion passes. Okay, so I would encourage you to all attend the Board of Finance meeting if you are interested. Do we have a date for that, Phil? Later this month. Look on the Board of Finance calendar.
I will share that with the board.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Next on our agenda is the discussion about the meeting minutes and what should or should not be included with them that we had discussed back in December and earlier also in January. So if we recall, there was a question that we sent to the attorney for further clarification, and we received a response to that. Phil, I don't have that up directly in front of me. Is it short enough that you can read it? Or summarize it?
You want it on screen?
Yes, it would be helpful just for purposes, so we're all referring to the same document. Okay. So the question that we asked very specifically was whether or not written communication sent to the Board of Education should be included in the minutes of a meeting. We have not done so previously, so whether other boards do or do not, our meetings are not a public hearing. It's not testimony that's provided to us. It's information that we might receive via email or in some other format. So the question was, do we read them into the minutes or do we include the document itself? And the attorney's answer pretty directly is no. She had done some research that the minutes are actually a record of our meeting and not of the different inputs into that meeting or information that we might have had. So that it's certainly information that is sent to us is part of the Freedom of Information Act so that people can, have access to those things. However, it is not a part of our meeting record. Donna, did you have any specific questions about this document before we switch to the conversation about the CABE response?
Yes.
Okay, we'll leave this up then.
So my problem is the sentence that says you also inquired about whether or not such communications must be read verbatim into the minutes. That isn't the question. It's if we want to, may we, are we permitted to? Because the letters that Michelle sent, for example, she had tables and charts in there. And it was a lot of information. Reading it, hearing it is a whole different matter than being able to actually look at it and think about it and make decisions for yourself. So I believe that there are times where, giving a summary, if someone sends a letter and they're going on and on about how wonderful the flowers are in front of the school, to just say we received a letter and members of the community are very pleased with the flower beds is fine. But when you look at something that has a lot more meat to it, I think it does a disservice to the community. First of all, when they don't get to see it unless they specifically ask. And most people don't have the time to dig that deep. But the minutes themselves were lacking so substantially because it just said that there were 2 letters from her. There was nothing that actually, it said 2 emails from Michelle Christensen. That was it. Nobody other than the people that were on the meeting have any idea what it was about. And because Phil didn't realize he'd actually received it, it would have been totally missed. And so I think we want our parents and our community members to participate. And I can understand if, somebody writes something that is vulgar and full of foul language or attach something that would be inappropriate for a school to be posting as far as, visual things. But I think that there's times when a board member should be able to request that something's attached in its entirety. Or we can just, there's just not enough here to be fair to the people of Wilmington. And to Mrs. Christensen too. I mean, she took time and effort. She researched the website that you recommended she go to, and she did a lot of deep digging. And I think that one of the things we need to do is have that information shared with Erin so that as she's going through and developing the curriculum, that she sees quite clearly from a reliable source where Wellington's weaknesses are. She may already be aware of them, but it would be nice to know as she's developing the curriculum, what she's implementing to help resolve those issues also. So I think that the question asked of the attorney was not an accurate question. And I also think that when I asked in December for Michelle's emails to be attached to the minutes, no one said to me, we're not permitted to do that, or that's against board policy. And I made the assumption that since I asked for them to be attached, that they would, and then to find out that they weren't was a little disheartening, to say the least. But so the real question is, are we allowed to, not do we have to?
Okay, and so this letter in particular says to whether or not you must. So you are correct in the reading of this, that this is about whether or not you must attach them. There are reasons why we may not want to make that a precedent, and we'll come to the CABE letter in a moment. And I just want to state for the record that this is in no way a reflection of what was in Ms. Christensen's email. She had already sent it to all of us. We had seen it. She had done her research. I appreciated the fact that she was so engaged. If only parents everywhere were that engaged and interested in what our schools are doing, the world would be a better place. So this is not a reflection on that particular document so much as it is that it raised an issue of process for us. What's the right process we should use going forward in regarding this type of information when it comes to the board's attention? So, Herb, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I read both of the letters that we've received. One from our attorney and the other from CABE. And I agree with them up to a point. I think what was asked of them was very narrow in its scope, because we have all kinds of documents that we handle. The minutes are really a history of the what happened at our meetings, and it's very important that we put down the members present and the kind of meeting it was, the name of the organization, the date, action, reports. For example, we had a report on the curriculum. Is that included? That someone from outside of the board, it's a member of our staff, so that we have, if we have a guest speaker in, for example, do we include them in the minutes, or we just mentioned the fact that they were a guest speaker? And so we have reports and we have adjournment. And the other thing that I don't think these two letters addressed was the fact that we have all kinds of documents that we receive. Like some of you have telephones in your hand. You might be texting some friend or something like that. That information becomes part of the board because we are meeting as a board, and your telephone becomes part of our history, really, and it's part of the documents. We have printed material. We have photostat material. We have, Erin's got printed copies of 50 pages of curriculum. And we have all kinds of documents that we receive. Now, what happens to them? If they're not included in the minutes, then do we have a file somewhere where we put these letters? Because under FOI, Freedom of Information, anything that we bring up at a meeting, any document that comes before us, has to be accessible to the public. I don't think we burn the letters. Do we have a file in the superintendent's office where he keeps track of all of these? I don't know. All I know is that the minutes are a history of what we're trying to do. And I think it is permissible, if the board wants to, we can put almost anything in there that we want. We're not limited to just the who was here and what action is taken. As a board, that's the minimum. You have to have those in there. If you want to, you can put letters in there from the public or attach them to the minutes. It's perfectly legal to do that. There's nothing illegal about that. And it is a history of what goes on at our board meetings. And we have members of the public who spend hours developing letters and communicating and sending them into us. In this past year, we had examples of that. We had innumerable numbers of letters that came in, and some of the material in those letters found its way into the minutes of the meeting. So there's a precedent for that as well. So that I think I agree with Donna in that there's no question that if we want to, as long as we meet the basic requirements, the historical items that we have to put in there, I think it's perfectly proper to either attach them, communication documents to the minutes, and it's appropriate to do that. And it's not going to make any difference with the minutes themselves, except that they will be attached. But they still have to be retained. You cannot burn those documents or anything like that, because you run into FOI. And FOI, if someone wants to come in and ask for a document, as long as it's not personnel or an executive session material and so forth, which we don't have to give them, we have to come up with those documents. So as I was saying, the basic things are historical, but also the documents have to be retained. You can't burn them. You can't destroy them, because someone may ask for the documents. The letters that were written this evening, for example, what happens to them? We can't destroy them. They're part of our meeting. And if someone asks for those letters, we better be able to come up with them. They've got to be on file somewhere. So I say just attach them to the minutes. It's not going to hurt anyone.
So I just want to narrow the scope of our conversation. No one is discussing breaking FOI law and burning documents. Even if the cost of fuel oil goes up higher, we will not be burning documents in the courtyard of the school to stay warm. But the question at hand is
what I said. I don't appreciate something like that. You're going to add something substantial, fine, but don't go that route.
If you would let me finish, I'm narrowing the scope to the conversation about the process by if and when we include information with our minutes, and not about how those documents that are presented at a meeting or are, you didn't let me finish, Herb, you interrupted me. I was trying to create a moment of levity. I'm sorry if you did not appreciate my.
You're making me very angry.
I see that.
Every time I make a presentation, a little talk or something like that, you go through and you edit it for everyone else. You don't have to do that. If you have an opinion, fine. But the chairman of the board, the presiding officer of the board, should be impartial on issues. And I think you're showing a little impartiality.
I'm sorry if we disagree on this topic, but on this one, I am trying to narrow the conversation to the point on the table, which is whether or not what the process is, we include information in our minutes, not about how we retain information that might be requested under FOI. So we've read from the lawyer that we do not have to include it, but the question is, should we? And if so, if we should, when should we? In which cases? So for example, Donna had raised the issue that we should not include anything that might be considered vulgar or inappropriate. There are ways in which we may want to have a more detailed conversation about what should or should not. Is it only if it's requested by a board member that it should be included, and not anything that is not requested? That's another possible caveat that we might list it. I think it's clear that we don't want to include everything that we receive in our email as an attachment to our meeting minutes, because that would be excessive. And we include information that is spoken, because we have in our minutes generally people who are present to speak. So this was very specifically something that was not read by the person at the meeting because she was unable to attend that particular meeting. Today, she and her husband did speak and read some of that, although it does not capture the full comprehensiveness of the charts and tables. I recognize that you miss something sometimes in making it verbal. So I just want to limit our conversation to what should we include and when should we include it. Sorry, go ahead, Anne.
I understand how, and I feel it's important that anyone in the public that would like to read this would have the opportunity to read it. I wonder if there could be a Google Drive somewhere or something, like we have documents stored for our school building committee. We have a Google Drive which stores all the documents related to that. I think the things on the minutes are things that appear as agenda items at the meeting. And I think that's what the minutes of the meeting are about. But I do realize that if we could come up with another creative way to make it accessible to the public, if anyone did want to read the letters, you know, they have a lot of good information. I don't know, Phil, is that a possibility with the Google Drive or something?
I think the question is not a matter of how, but when. Like, when should you and when shouldn't you? So are you saying that if it's related to an item on the agenda, and if a Board of Education member requests it, you know, like when would you exclude it and how would you exclude it? What if you and I disagreed whether or not it should be included? Do we have to vote on every piece, whether it's included or not? So I want to get to the level of the
right. Well, this
not the how, because honestly, no one is preventing anyone from sharing their information. We are not, you know, squelching someone's, you know, First Amendment right to say what they want to say. They can say whatever they want in the broader public. They can post it on Facebook. They can hand it out standing outside the supermarket, you know, whatever it is that they want to do. The question is, for our legally responsible minutes that we must post, when do we include information that comes from outside of this organization that was not requested as part of a presentation on an agenda? When, if at all, do we include that as part of our minutes?
Well, as I said, I think it's only the items that are on the agenda, you know, that should be part of the minutes. So you would limit it
to the things on the agenda. Okay.
I agree. But I think that whole present to speak domain, we have a lot of valuable information and opinions and things like that, that I don't know. I don't know if any other boards handle, you know, do anything to archive that information or not, but we might want to look at an alternate way to house or share that information. Just a thought, looking for a different kind of solution.
Donna, before we come back to you, I just want to offer Tracy, Laura, or Brianna an opportunity if there's any questions or anything you want to raise before we go back around for a second option. Go ahead, Tracy.
just want, when the letter was up on the screen before from the attorney, and it said that it could be requested through Freedom of Information. I'm not sure how you would, what the approach is to get that, I guess. If it's supposed to be available, how would you obtain that? Because I guess I would have to research that even as a board member. I'm not sure how that happens. And then the other part was, one of Donna's points was that it just says that, communication from Michelle Christensen. It doesn't say the subject. So I do remember during some of our agendas, it had mentioned the name and what the topic was, I guess. Is that something that we could possibly do to, as part of whatever we decide to do, is to at least have, an idea of what that communication was about.
And would you also include in any way a summary, or just to say, was in support of or opposed to this? Or in this case, it was much more intensive than that. It was not a single yay or nay.
I just remember on other times there was a mention of just one, earlier in the fall, there was something about, communication from so-and-so and what it was, the topic. It
On
was just
X.
like a
including
phrase
the
that said
topic.
what it was about. I can't remember
Okay.
anything specific. I have to look back through agendas or minutes to see that. But
Okay,
just an idea.
thank you. Laura or Brianna, if not, I'll move on to. Okay, sorry, giving you a minute to unmute. Go ahead, Laura.
Yeah, yes. It's always trying to find that mute. So I think I there's just a lot to think about here, and I agree. I think the first question is the limiting question. If because I have kind of a problem with us deciding whose letters we would attach and whose we wouldn't. So I kind of feel like if it's something we're going to do, then it should be everyone. And I think that can pose a lot of difficulties to attach all outside communication to our minutes. And again, our minutes being the historical record of our meetings. And this is something in addition. I liked Anne's idea of maybe having a place where that type of those documents could be on a Google Drive or something, because I think they could be very valuable for everyone to see. But a person who goes on about how lovely the gardens are and their letters not included, I mean, who are we to say that that's not a valuable, opinion that shouldn't be included along with somebody else's letter on another issue. So I kind of have an issue with us choosing which ones would be included. And that's one reason I think why the lawyer probably goes to what are our responsibilities, because if you open up something like that, it can explode on you. But having a place outside of the minutes where those things could be stored, I think might be a very good idea.
Donna had her hand up first, and then you, Herb.
Herb can go first. That's fine with me.
Okay, go ahead, Herb.
I think that any written, I think our attorney said that any written communication to one or more of the boards becomes a public document. So you just can't choose. They're public documents.
Okay, I don't think that was in question.
I just want to clarify what you just said. Are you saying that any communication between board members or out from me would then be added to communications and added to the minutes?
No, he's saying that it's a public document and could be subject to FOI.
Okay.
Am I correct, Herb? I did not put words in your mouth?
Well, any public document should be accessible under FOI.
Mhm.
Yes.
Right. And that's true. That is not at issue. Donna?
Except that the attorney did bring it up as part of this issue.
Yes, yes. But I think we're all in agreement with that issue. The issue is not whether or not it's a public document. The issue is whether or not we should include it in our minutes.
But that was in the attorney's summary of the question.
Mhm.
They were trying
Yes.
to cover there.
Mhm.
It's a legal document.
Donna?
Well, I've got several concerns. One is I would like this letter attached. How it was portrayed in the minutes did not give enough information at all. So that even if somebody looked at the minutes later and they were remotely curious, they're just going to breeze right by it. Because of the uniqueness of this particular letter with the tables, charts, it doesn't do the information justice by skimming over it, which is why I asked for it to be added. And I don't think that the public should have to jump through all sorts of crazy hoops. So I would like this particular letter, because of its uniqueness and the information provided, attached so that everybody can look at it for themselves. You know, she went, I did not go back and fact check her. I made the assumption that she went to a reliable website that you recommended, and that the content is fine, but I'd like to make a motion to attach Michelle Christensen's Saturday, November 13th, 2021 email to our minutes so that people can read it for themselves. And that way it's there for everybody to see. No one needs to jump through hoops, and we don't have to try and figure out where it is, because it's the right thing to do. And if you'd like to limit it, we can limit it to letters from residents, so that if we start getting letters from the rest of the world, that it doesn't necessarily have, you know, it's the people of Wellington, for the people of Wellington, by the people of Wellington.
So that does limit it, so that we don't have to include every email that we get. You do raise an interesting point, Donna, and that is that you did not verify the information in that email. And if we were setting a precedent that we included information from any resident of any length, then whether or not we have vetted or approved or checked their data, it becomes part of our ongoing legal record. And when we approve those minutes the next month. So there is a question of, I don't want to say accuracy, but it's not only the facts within it, but what if somebody said something that wasn't quite vulgar, but was breaking the law in some other way?
Well,
Or strongly recommending that we as the board should do something inappropriate. Do we make that part of the record? Like, where do we draw the line? And how do we make decisions that are going to set a precedent? Because if we do it for one, we have to do it for all. We can't pick and choose who we're going to let in.
well, you want to say that charts and tables?
So then everybody will put a table in their document to make sure it gets included.
And why it's a big deal to have this as an attachment.
It's a big deal because it sets a new precedent. It changes the way we've done things.
Well,
If we're setting a process, we should set a policy that that's the way we're going to do things from then on. We shouldn't have one-off decisions that apply only because it's a friend of Michelle's or, a friend of Donna's. So if we're going to set a precedent, we should do so thoughtfully.
Well, we can also, and I said this at one of the meetings, that if this information wasn't included, I would read it. And I also said I did not think that that was a valuable use of the board's time for me to say, line 1, Gen X accountability 2017 to 2018 under the Wellington K-8 column is 81.8. I mean, that's just, it's not fair to my fellow board members. It's not fair to the people of Wellington to have me read a table. So in lieu of me reading every single line, I think it makes more sense and it'll be more useful information if people can just see it.
So Donna, one of the things that you and I exchanged an email about, I believe in December, was about could we have a special workshop, a special meeting to discuss this? I think you were hoping to have one sooner, and I pushed it off until after the budget process was completed. So I think that we're not in any way trying to not have a conversation about this, but I think it would make sense for us to have a full conversation about this with presentations from the superintendent and the principals about the data with lots of sources of information, and really have a deep dive on what this information means, as opposed to having something as a one-off piece go into the minutes just because it was there. We covered most of the content. We will have future meetings where we will cover the content. I'm just hesitant to set a precedent that goes against best practices. Phil, I think I saw your hand up. Did you have a response to something that was still relevant?
I would suggest to the board that if you are considering limiting any communications, if you attach one and not others, I would suggest you ask the attorney if that is legal.
Which was what the question was last month, may we? And that's not the question you asked. We got it, or the question that was answered. And so this goes into a big circle.
No, hold on, Donna. You have said that several times. Let me read you exactly what I requested of the attorney. I said, these are the following questions, some guidance on the following questions. If an individual reads a letter during present to speak, should the entirety be included in the minutes? The second question was, if a board member requests a letter be written into the minutes or attached, should that occur? The third question, can you share what other districts do regarding the handling of communications from members of the public? Fourth question, do other districts attach all communications as part of the minutes? Fifth question, do other districts simply list the names of the individuals that they received the communication from in the minutes? And the last question was, does the chair provide a synopsis of each communication received? Those are the questions that were asked.
All right, but what was the answer then? Because I must have missed something in the answer. Because you asked.
Her response is what is all of those questions is what is in the letter that you received. So she's basically saying in the letter, she doesn't know of any district that is attaching them because who's verifying that information? And there's an FOI process for that. If anybody from the public wanted to request that information, there's a whole legal process that I have to follow to provide that information to them, and how I do that. And then, and I think that gets to you, to your Google Drive point. That's additional work that there's already a process for. There's a process for freedom of information, and Herb is right. Any document that is a board communication, a board document. Do you want my presentation from tonight? You can have it. Any of my preparations, do you want my preparation notes? It's an FOI document. Herb is right. What my suggestion is I would caution the board legally. If you are allowing someone to put their their letter into your minutes and not someone else, I think you might be infringing on someone's rights, the person that you are not allowing in. And I would definitely request that you contact the attorney with that exact question.
Tracy, was your hand up before? Is it still relevant?
Yes, there was two things. Number one, I'm not usually a policy person, but I agree with Michelle here that I feel like this is a policy thing that we need to, if we're going to start a different thing, we need to put a policy in place, because my experience in the 4.5 years is that if we're going to change something, we have a policy for that. And the second thing was, there's another letter communication that came in from Patrice, I don't know her last name,
McCarthy.
that had some other recommendations of what other boards do, and CABE is an organization we often follow. I mean, we should follow the lawyer, but also follow some of what other boards of education do. So, and we haven't even talked about that part of that here. And I don't know. This is an agenda item, but it seems like we're going around in a circle and taking a really long time.
Understood. Brianna, I see your hand is up and you haven't had a chance to participate yet.
Yes, because I'm nervous. So I'm going to ask for some grace here, because the last thing I want to do is offend anybody. And sometimes I get twisted up in my words when I'm feeling this way. Okay. Like you said, Michelle, I love that the Christensens went ahead and did all of that deep diving and digging, and were impassioned enough to go out and do that sort of research, and then to be willing to share it with us, the Board of Education, as well as community members. I think that's great. And I appreciate it. And it's so nice to have that support and help. Goodness knows we can't do all that legwork ourselves. So let me just get this straight. So Donna, what you're saying is you want these letters included in our minutes. Well, first of all, we know it, right? As it was sent to us, but you want to include it in the minutes because you think it's valuable information that the public may want for reference. Do I have that part right so far?
I think that the public needs to be able to see this and evaluate it for themselves, especially since I've raised the question about how well the schools are doing.
Okay, so it was these letters are in response to something that you had prior brought up in a different meeting. Yes.
Correct. And then
okay,
Michelle, it recommended going to this particular website and doing research. And the Christensens, Michelle Christensen, it gets confusing because there's two Michelles. So Michelle Christensen went to the website recommended by Michelle Doucette Cunningham.
Yeah.
And did the research.
Okay. And then she had some response to it or something she wanted to share based on that. I don't mean to rehash everything, everybody. Yes. I just want to like recap so I know where we're at. Yes. Okay. Gotcha. Okay. So that leaves me wondering if it's our responsibility as the board to be the conduit for the data that the Christensens went ahead and gathered in this case. By submitting the letters or reading them aloud, the Board of Education has received the information, and then we can do with it what we need to, what we think is appropriate. Is it our job to be the people who give that to the public? I think is what I'm wondering, because is that maybe what we're asking by putting it all in the minutes, is that we're providing information to the public?
Which yes, then you boiled it down. You boiled it down. You see, that's what happens when you wait for the introverts to think it through. They get to the niche of it. So
if only we had 10 hours every time something came up. Okay, so I just want to make sure I got the whole thing. Okay,
you are correct.
Is it our responsibility to be the conduit for the data that in this case, the Christensens provided us, which is wonderful and awesome of them. And I don't know if that's our place or responsibility, but I also hear people saying that it would be pretty great if someone does all of this work, that there is some way folks can reach out and get it without having to do the whole work themselves. So do we have to provide all of that information, as in putting the letters in our minutes in completion? Or, and here's Anne thinking outside the box, poking into my head too. How can we help be a little bit less of a direct route, but still help that connection between the public and these letters, this information that's provided to the board? So could we ask, this is way out there, could we ask people who send in some sort of written letter to, if it's okay with them, if we include their email address or some way to contact them? Because then if somebody reads through our minutes, they see that Michelle Christensen shared some information that she had gathered. They see that Mr. Arthur Christensen offered some more data on the same similar topic. And if you want to know as a public member, as someone who lives in Willington, more about that, here is how you could reach them. Because then people still have a way to be like, oh yeah, I'd like to know more about that. Let me go ahead and email them, if that's okay with the authors, in this case, the Christensens. Thanks for being our example tonight. Can we do something like that? So we sort of are like a quick way to pass it, rather than being the one and only way that we're displaying everybody's information.
I would be concerned with putting potentially total strangers in touch directly with people in our town.
That's why I think it would obviously.
That's, to me, I mean, when people get on, they're already giving their name and their address. So, you know,
that's why I said, could we ask the authors? Obviously, we're not going to just go ahead and do
that's, to me, that's worse.
Okay.
Okay, so I have a proposal. It's after 9, we're not done with the agenda yet. I think we should send this to the policy committee to come back to us with a draft policy on how we wish to handle outside information. And it can include, Herb, you're also on the policy committee, can include anything that you want to include. If you want to, you know, describe a specific policy, not only for things that are emailed to us, but for other documents that are part of the public record, we can be as explicit as we want. How's that about bringing something forward without having to continue on ad nauseum this evening?
I'm okay with that on the condition that we don't finalize the December 14th meeting minutes, because that's when I asked for them to be in. And we just pose that one and move on with the other stuff.
Phil?
Just to be clear, all of the data is on our website. EdSite is accessible to anybody. So I appreciate the work the Christensens did as well. But to be honest with you, if the Christensen had emailed me, I already have that data. The 15, 16, 16, 17, 17, 18, and 18, 19 SBAC data is on the website, as is our presentation that we did. And I believe, Michelle, it was not December, I believe it was October of this year with comparison. And so if it's about data, I have it. I'm glad to share it with anybody, and we have on the website. If it's about any communication, I think policy is a smart way to go. But I would, again, urge you to make sure you consult the attorney to make sure what you're coming up with is legal.
That's fair. Donna, we have a lot of minutes to finish today. There's nothing stopping the Christensens or anyone else on this meeting from publishing that document on their social media, in other places. You know, certainly lots of folks have websites in other places. There are other avenues for it to happen. It does not have to happen in our minutes. And we've heard most of it verbally today. Is it worth holding this up for another month or two?
No, I guess it's not, because actually when I look at the next month's minutes, I asked for something very, the minutes I'm finding are a bit lacking.
Lacking in detail?
Yeah, you know, like,
I'm sorry I laughed. It's just they were 20 pages. It took forever to read them this month. If I had my way, we would limit our minutes to motions and votes and who was present and, you know, and discussion ensued would be the extent of what we do, because we include the video. Anybody can listen to anything at all of our meetings. Everything is public and transparent. If I have to keep reading minutes like this, if we have another month with 20 pages of minutes, I'm going to go crazy. So I'm sorry that I laughed on it. That was what it was. It was just, if they're lacking in detail, it's quality rather than quantity that they're lacking.
I would say, do as you see fit, because it's, we're going in circles. And
okay.
I'm sure it's
Can
just.
we refer back to that letter from Patrice just for a second? Because I think it applies to what Donna's saying. They may seem lacking, except that I think we're putting a whole lot more in than what is required for most boards
Okay.
to do.
So I'm going to move that we, is it called, Herb, point of parliament question, is it considered tabled if we send it to committee? Tabled for discussion by a committee?
Yeah, we can send it to committee.
Okay, so I'm going to make a motion that we send this issue to the policy committee.
Donna made a motion, didn't she?
No one seconded it.
Okay.
We'll see if anybody seconds my motion. And you have to come off mute and say it verbally if you're interested.
I second the motion.
Okay, are there further questions or concerns about what should be included in that conversation at the policy committee? Okay, all those in favor of sending the issue to the policy committee to bring a proposal back to the board at a future meeting, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I
Opposed? Abstentions?
I abstain.
Okay, so it was not unanimous. We have to do this as a roll call vote. I'm just going to go across the screen. You've all moved, so I'm going to do it differently. Brianna, we're starting with you.
yes.
Herb,
Abstain.
Anne,
Yes,
Tracy,
Yes.
Laura,
Yes.
Donna,
Abstain.
Michelle, I vote yes. Okay, so the motion passes and it goes to committee. Thank you for your patience. This is important that we get it right. So I'm sure the policy committee will have further conversations and will not keep the rest of you awake longer than we have to tonight. Moving on, the next step, the next thing.
Could we take a 5-minute break?
Let me see what else is on the agenda. Last time we did that and then we only went another 5 minutes after the break. Oh, we still have to talk about the mask mandate. If you want to make a motion, Donna?
I make a motion that we take a 5-minute break.
I will
It's not a
second.
break. It has to be a recess.
Okay, so move that we recess for 5 minutes. There's a motion and a second. Is that wording acceptable to you, Donna?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
I'm going to abstain.
And if you abstain, we have to do it by roll call.
Oh, okay.
Brianna? No,
I'm
that's
sorry.
right. We'll do it. We'll do it the right way. Brianna?
No.
Herb? Herb?
What am I voting for?
Okay, all those in favor of a 5-minute recess?
Okay, yes.
Okay, Anne?
Yes, for those who need the break.
Tracy?
Yes.
Laura?
Yes.
Donna?
Yes.
Michelle? Yes. Okay, so we are taking a recess. It is 9:12. We will re-adjourn at 9:17. 17.
How come
I
I'm
move
not,
it. Go ahead, Herb.
I'm not back? I can't see any of you.
Okay.
What happened?
We can hear you fine. Can you hear us?
I can hear you, but I can't see you.
Did your screen go on power saver maybe?
It says your meeting will start in a few seconds.
Did you maybe re-click to restart? Maybe if you go out and come back in again?
Maybe.
Oh, Herb, the other thing you can try is look for an icon of a Zoom camera.
On the
And click
bottom
on
left
that.
corner.
We see and hear you though, so that's unusual.
Wait a minute.
A little camera, little Zoom camera.
On my screen, they show up under the lower left when I move my mouse around. One looks like a microphone, and then the one just to the side of it looks like a little camera.
It's under the Zoom screen. It's on your regular computer strip along the bottom. It's blue with a white camera.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Video
Ann.
camera. Okay.
Did it help? Can you see us now?
Ann helped me out there.
Yay, that's great.
Call Ann Grosjean for tech support. Okay. I move that we reconvene
You don't
at,
have to move. You
What?
just said- you just come out of,
oh, okay. We come out of recess at 9:18.
yeah.
Okay, and we are recording. So I'm going to move this along a little faster so that we can eventually finish our meeting. And I'm going to combine all of the meeting minutes in one motion. So hold your horses and we'll do it all at once. I move that we approve the meeting minutes for our regular meetings of December 14th, 2021 and January 11th, 2022, and our special meetings of January 25th, 2022, February 1st, 2022, and the curriculum committee meeting of January 24th, 2022. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Herb, thank you for seconding it. Are there additional questions or can we move to a vote?
There's one editorial change in the special meeting.
Which one, Herb? January 25th or February 1st?
25th.
Okay.
So, I don't know. Which one is it? I don't know where it is, but it's where we recessed on page 17. Page 17 of the minutes.
Do you have a
It says-
specific
it says
correction you'd
Michelle-
like to make?
Yeah, it's just a editorial thing. Michelle Cunningham moved to adjourn the meeting until 8:15 for a break. Normally, you move to recess the meeting. So I changed adjourn to recess until 8:15. And then when you move to reconvene, you really didn't have to do that. You just did what you did a moment
Right,
ago.
so I think the minutes are correct. I did it incorrectly at the special meeting. So if you're okay with leaving the minutes the way they are, I promise I will recess in the future and do it correctly.
No problem.
Is that fair?
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay, I'm learning. Okay, all those in favor of approving all of the minutes I just documented the dates for, signify by saying aye.
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 Hi.
Opposed, signify by saying nay. Abstentions. Brianna? Okay, so we're gonna do this. I'm gonna go through and we'll do it roll call vote, not for all of the minutes all at once. Herb,
Yes.
Ann Grosjean,
Yes.
Laura Rodriguez,
Yes.
Brianna Ross,
Abstain.
Tracy Anderson,
Yes.
Donna Cook,
Abstain.
Michelle Cunningham, yes. Motion passes. Okay. Next on our agenda is the discussion of the governor's executive order regarding school mask mandates.
Updates, Michelle, if you want.
Go ahead.
So just to give you some background, and this is kind of hot off the press as this announcement was made yesterday. So the governor's executive powers expire on February 15th. Today, the legislature held a public hearing on possibly extending 11 of his executive orders, and one of those is including the school and early childcare mask mandate. The House is scheduled to address the same issue on February 10th, and the Senate is convening Monday on February 14th for the same purpose. So it's not clear what's going to happen at this point other than his press conference yesterday. The second part of this that's interesting is that the bus mandate is separate than the governor's mandate. The bus mandate is pursuant to federal statute and regs that the CDC issued. And they're the ones that issued the order that states a person must wear a mask on a bus for transportation. And that order for the bus remains in effect unless it's modified or rescinded, or until the U.S. Secretary of Health and Human Services rescinds the determination that there's no longer a public health crisis. So basically, individuals traveling on buses will need to wear masks. That's a totally separate issue than the governor's response. And then the other thing I'm going to say is DPH was on the announcement yesterday, but we received the communication today in my office from Rob Miller, who's the director of Eastern Highlands Health District. And they were supposedly met with DPH today, and they expect guidance for local officials soon. We don't have anything yet, though. So that's kind of the update that I have based upon a 5 o'clock press conference, 4 o'clock press conference yesterday.
But I think the result of what you've just said, Phil, is that we need to vote tonight in case his emergency powers are not extended, so we don't have to do an emergency meeting next week. So for the sake of brevity, I'm going to move that we maintain the mask mandate in the schools for another month until we have further guidance and information and we can reassess where we are. That we would, let's see, our next meeting is March 8th, so that move that we maintain the mask mandate until March 11th, that if we do remove it, that'll give us a couple of days grace to implement that. Does that sound reasonable? Tracy?
I'll second the motion.
Okay, well, now we can have discussion since we have something concrete to talk about. Laura? And then Ann?
Said, because everything's up in the air right now and we don't have guidance from the health district, I support that. I think, I want to see when the health district recommends that it's okay, not just the governor executive powers ending. So, because there's just uncertainty, I think that we should continue with it until we know more.
Ann, I saw your hand up.
The rates are still up there. If the rates were back down at 1 or below, I might be more willing to consider it, but I really think we need to wait until we see that things are really down. I'm very relieved to hear that the buses are under CDC orders, because that's where there's a huge amount of transmission. You have different kids from different classes. And so I'm really relieved to hear that that's under CDC orders for as long as they are. But I think even that the legislature is considering extending that one mandate, I think we really need to wait and see what they decide upon before we make a decision as a board.
Other thoughts?
I would like to see that, if the state no longer requires the mask mandate, that we no longer require the mask mandate. I mean, Phil said that there are 80 plus COVID cases. Do we have any idea out of our total student teacher population, how many of those have already had COVID? So they would have theoretically have natural immunities. And then there's a lot of people that have already had the shots and the boosters and things like that. I'm very concerned about the learning loss because of faces being covered. And there was a very recent study that came out of Johns Hopkins that basically said cloth masks don't really do anything. I'm not a scientist. Johns Hopkins is much higher than my pay grade. So Phil, do you know the total number of students / staff?
I don't, and I could figure out the total number of cases. We'd have to go back and cross-reference because we're actually seeing people, certain individuals are getting COVID for a second time.
Right. You couldn't rule it out because of the different variants.
I'd have to look by, we have it by name. It's, obviously confidential, but we could determine percentage from, I don't know when you would do it from, because that whole concept of 90 days of natural immunity is kind of going out the window a little bit now that they're hearing that you can have a different variant. You can be have your immunity to one and not necessarily the other, depending on viral load.
Because 80 people is definitely a high percentage.
It is, I agree.
Our students and staff. I mean, it would be a different story if we had 10,000 students, but we have less than 400. I don't know what our total number of bodies in the buildings are, but it's a pretty high percentage of people that have already had it. And the goal is to protect people from life-threatening, and if they're getting it a second time, they've obviously survived the first time, not trying to minimize anything that anybody's gone through.
That's like 16% in the last month.
Go ahead, Brianna.
So this just landed on our plate. It is super important and a super hot issue. And so, Phil, I wanted to ask you, what is the name of the group of superintendents that you meet with? Is it, and is that regional?
Yes.
Okay, and so when are you meeting again?
So I think we meet again on Thursday. What's interesting is I don't know that this is a superintendent issue. And I'll be quite frank and say I'm not sure if this is a politics issue as well. I think all along we've tried to listen to the science that we knew that day. I think some of the science we followed in the beginning that we thought was science, we've learned more about, and things have changed some, and we've adapted as we've gone. But that's, the next time we'll talk is probably Thursday, and I think the majority of superintendents are it's a board decision.
Okay, just asking because for me, that's a resource that I would want some information from before I make a decision. So that knowing that sort of thing, talking to our community, talking to our administration and our teachers and so on, that's all conversation and information I would want before making any sort of change to how we have things. So
yeah,
that's why I'm asking. Thank you.
I think the message is pretty simple, that yesterday's press conference was about allowing local control based upon your metrics and where you're at, your vaccination rates. That's what the decision is supposed to be around. But we don't have any more guidance yet beyond what was said. The other thing I'll tell you, Brianna, that's interesting is that there are certain towns that if you have a mayor that has said there's a mask mandate, that trumps it. So your schools have to have a mask mandate. You have to follow it. So Mansfield is one of those towns. So it doesn't, from what I understand, it doesn't matter what residents think in Mansfield as far regarding the schools. As long as that mask mandate is in place, the schools have it in place. If that is removed from the town, then it would become a Board of Education decision in Mansfield. So there's a lot of moving parts to decision-making for various towns, depending on what they have for government and what's in place already.
Right. And there are probably boards of education that are not meeting right now, having just learned this information. So that's something else I'm thinking about. But anyway, thanks.
And we can't forget the comment made earlier that we do have preschoolers in our building who cannot be vaccinated yet. And we have parents of preschoolers and brothers and sisters of preschoolers. I believe that I read that they're going to consider emergency authorization for the vaccination for the younger kids sometime this month. So there is hope that in coming months that some of that will be addressed for some children who can get vaccines, but it just feels really early. Additional comments or questions? Did I miss somebody's hand? Tracy and then Ann?
I was just wondering, Phil, if there was any consideration of input from the faculty and staff who have to be in the buildings with these kids for 6 to 8 hours at a time, what their feeling is, and they're the ones that are educating the kids in our buildings.
The CEA put out a survey. I haven't seen the results. It just went out this past weekend, from what I understand. I don't know what our local results are. I know just by word of mouth that there's concern still. It's hard to kind of wrap your mind around going from a recommendation of wearing an N95 mask to there's no longer a mask mandate required by your state. It's now local control. And so I think that's what people are trying to wrap their minds around. I think, people can provide input to, if, Michelle's motion passes, I would anticipate that, we could put something in the digital backpack for parents to say, chime in. The issue is going to be, there's some people that believe it should be, and there's some people that believe it shouldn't be at this point in time. You could take that information and go, we're going to vote based upon that. I just don't know if their perception, someone's belief in that situation is how you make your determination. Because, and I'm going to give you the example, there's been a lot of question about personal liability in this for Board of Ed members. There's been question about lawsuits and your decision-making and policy. You do have the legal authority to create a mask mandate as a policy, as long as you are pointing to the reasons why. And when I don't want to downplay the opinions of staff members or parents, they're important. But in the end, what's going to hold up in court is who are the agencies that you are following. So DPH has not said don't wear masks. The DPH has said look at your local metrics and make your own decision based upon the information you have. We will see what Eastern Highlands has to say. I think we take the input of our medical advisor. We look at the bigger picture of what are some of these other agencies saying. That's where I would take the information from and share it with you. What is WHO saying? What is CDC saying? What is the American Academy of Pediatrics saying? What is Johns Hopkins saying? And then you make a determination based upon that, because honestly, the lawsuits that have been upheld in support of boards of education have been the ones that are backed based upon that information, because you are responsible in local parentis. The staff is in place of parents when children are in school, and your job is to set policy to keep them safe, and that is how they look at addressing it.
Thank you, Phil. That's useful information.
Yep.
And if the mandate was lifted, it wouldn't preclude a student from wearing a mask should they feel that they want to, would it?
Correct. No.
Right. It's not a mask prohibition, which has
Correct.
been discussed in other places. That's not what this is. Okay.
Correct.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Additional comments before we move to a vote? Okay. All those in favor of maintaining our mask mandate until March 11th, pending further conversation at our March meeting? Signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed?
Opposed?
Abstentions?
Opposed.
Okay, so we're gonna do this by name again. If you would just say, yay or opposed. Sorry. Okay, Herb, Erica, we'll start with you.
Nay.
Ann Grosjean,
Yes.
Laura Rodriguez,
Yes.
Brianna Ross,
Yes.
Tracy Anderson. Oh, Tracy, we couldn't hear you. It was still on mute.
Yes.
Donna Cook,
Nay.
Michelle Cunningham, yes. Okay, so the motion passes. We'll put it on the agenda for the March meeting and we will have further information collected and assessment when we return next month. Okay. We are at the end of the formal part of our agenda. We have left present to speak and board comment. If there are any members of the public who would like to speak, we ask that you raise your hand, or easier if you can raise your hand the way they have on the screen, or come on video so we can see you waving at us. Okay, so Sarah Reese and then Ralph Toulis, I see. Give us a moment to take you off of mute.
Sorry, I had to get my note down.
Okay, please first
Sarah,
state
you
your
can do it.
name and your location, or your address, I mean.
Sarah Reese, Pinecrest Road. Hi, everyone. I hope you're all doing good. I just wanted to echo what Mrs. Baker and Brianna said in the meeting, that it would be important to gather the thoughts not only of the parents, but also maybe the students, faculty, and health department before making a final decision. And I truly feel for you guys having to make this decision, because I feel like it's going to be a no-win situation, probably met with hostility. And for that, I'm sorry. So thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Ralph had your hand up next, and then Melissa Abercrombie. Phil, can you take Ralph off mute? Hold on, Ralph, you're still on mute. Looks like you're out in the snow, Ralph. Okay, there we go.
Now I'm good to go. Okay. Ralph Toulis,
Yes.
47 Village Hill Road, Wellington. I have a couple topics I'd like to comment on. I don't know how many of you know me. I know several of you. I was on planning and zoning for 15 years, so we had many discussions about what should and shouldn't be in minutes. And I just want to offer some suggestions. Obviously, there's a statutory requirement for what is in the minutes. Anything beyond that, of course, is a policy decision. Now, with planning and zoning, one of the agenda items we always had was correspondence. And during the meeting, our zoning agent would run through the list of correspondence that we received since the last meeting. Who it was, what the topic was, and that was, we had some discussion about it, but as far as what was reflected in the minutes, it was just got a letter from so-and-so and the topic was this, and that was it. That's all that was put in the minutes. I think that's a great way to handle it. If someone is curious beyond that, obviously that correspondence has to be in the record. Some of the unnecessary stuff that I see in your minutes, you don't want to include the text of a letter, but you do include board comments at the end of the meeting in the minutes. Now, that's not pertinent by statute. Obviously, you all are free to discuss whatever you want to discuss in the meeting. Whether or not that's in the minutes is, I guess, again, a policy thing. Board comments, though, is not the time to debate any present to speak topics that might have been brought up by a resident. It is just a time to express pertinent board comments. Anyway, moving on. One of the things I was hoping to see on the agenda was the ed specs. Because we now have by the way, I'm on a school building committee. I speak for myself. I'm not speaking for the committee. I would like to see the ed specs developed as quickly as possible, because one of the key pieces of information that we're going to need to decide the direction of this project is the spatial requirements, both interior and exterior. That's going to be a determining factor in where we go with this project. So the sooner that this board can get together with our owner's project manager, the better. I think getting an application into OSCGR this June is not realistic. I think Phil has commented on that in a prior meeting, but I would like to see some action going from this board so that we can continue to do our work. And I think that's it. As far as the minutes, just back to that for a second, I think consistency from meeting to meeting is important. And you can't pick and choose when something goes in and when it doesn't. So I like the way we handled it on planning and zoning. I think it's a reasonable compromise. Anyway, just offering some input. You all do with it as you see fit. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Toulis. Next is Melissa Abercrombie. If you would take her off mute, please. If you would give your name and address for the record, Melissa.
Hi, Melissa Abercrombie, 238 Toland Turnpike in Wellington. I just have a question. I'm new to Wellington, so I'm still learning everything, and my daughter is in first grade there. And did I hear correctly that asbestos was found in the hallway at the elementary school?
Melissa, typically we don't answer questions during present to
okay.
speak.
Well,
it was briefly mentioned. If you stay on the call for a second, Mr. Stevens will repeat what he said earlier in the meeting for you.
well, I could just, if you don't answer, I could just say, that's what I think I heard, and that's concerning as a parent. And that's good that it's not in the classroom, but in the hallways still, if that is what I heard, that's not something as a parent I would like to hear in a BOE meeting. Then I'd like to know if it was found there and it's just because of the water damage and the pipe breaks, does it exist elsewhere? Because did we only look there because of the damage? Or are we actually checking other places? Because if it exists there, then it probably is somewhere else, is my thinking. And also, to go along with it, it seems, as I'm learning my way around it, the school is really old. And I'm so glad that y'all are considering building a new school. Hopefully that gets done soon. But what other tests are being done to make sure that the kids, like the water, is the water tested? Do we have access to those results so we could see? Is there, what's being done to validate that that is a safe place for our kids to be?
Okay, thank you, Ms. Abercrombie. We have heard your concerns. And I saw Mr. Stevens nodding his head, and I'm sure he will address them in some way, shape, or form. Other people who are present to speak. Mr. Christensen. Oh, things moved around on my screen. Oh, there you are.
Sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
That's okay. Arthur Christensen, 14 Birch Meadow Lane. I just want to give my thoughts on, and I understand it's tough to be impartial when it's my wife, but as far as including her emails in minutes, and this would go for anything else or anybody else who has correspondence like this, if something is brought up in a Board of Education meeting, now 3 meetings in a row, I think as a member of the community, if it wasn't my family, if it was something else that I could read, I would like to have easy access to see what the board is talking about and what is the topic of conversation. So just my 2 cents in it is, if it becomes a very vocal part of the meeting, I feel that could be a criteria to be included, so the public who listens or reads the minutes could have a way to go back and see what the board was talking about. That's my 2 cents there. And just to say something about the school mask mandate, I would just like to remind everybody that of 880,000 deaths, 770 were children. That's 0.8%. So I really don't think there is much danger in the schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Megan? Go ahead, Megan, if you give your full name and your address, please.
Megan Zabo, Fisher Hill Road. I would just like to speak about the mask mandate. First of all, every time numbers came out, I would call and find out if there was any in-school transmission, which I was told there wasn't any in-school transmission. It was community-based, which means the masks work. These children aren't catching COVID from their peers. They're not catching COVID from their teachers and faculty members because they're wearing masks. There's children who aren't eligible for the vaccine. There's children who, even if eligible, their parents are against the vaccine. We've come this far in the pandemic, keeping our children safe, and we've been able to stay in school this whole time. So why change it now? We have 3.5 months left of school. They get to be in school. They get to see their friends. There's new variants coming out that are saying even more contagious. Why risk it? It's not worth the risk. I can send my child safely to school now because he's wearing a mask, and he's happy because he can go to school. I think the issue is the parents who think their children have issues with masks because the kids really don't care. So I urge you to please look at the numbers that have been in the school. And I'm sure Mr. Stevens can tell you as well, there's no in-school transmission. And this whole time it's because they've been wearing the masks. So I thank you for keeping it going till March 8th, but I also request just keep it going to the end of the school year and reevaluate for 2022, 2023. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Zabo. Others present to speak? Julie Marshall.
Unmute me.
Yes, we can hear you now.
I just wanted to make a comment. Arthur mentioned there are 700 and something kids that are dead. So I want to make it very clear that that's not a small number. And if we decide to take away the mask mandate and even one child in Wellington gets COVID and dies because of it, that one child is a huge number. And I want the people who think that percent is super small to think about if that was your child or one that you knew. That's all.
Thank you, Ms. Marshall. I appreciate your comments. Are there any others on the call? I'm not seeing any hands. Peter. Hold on, let's see if we can get you off mute, whether it shows it or not. That looks good. Say something, we'll see if we can hear you.
Peter Lutencich, 97 Trask Road. I want to follow up on my earlier comments during present to speak. Sadly, I see the board tonight has chosen to double down on the side of tyranny. It's shocking to me that you would weaponize the town attorney against the townspeople to get the conclusion that you wanted to limit public discourse. You are not some kind of privy council serving King George III. This is Wellington. We have a legislative form of government where the townspeople are sovereign. We don't work for you, CABE, or the teachers union. You work for us, and you're accountable to us. And the notion that the chair would even suggest that Wellington residents participating in a public meeting or somehow engaging in criminal behavior is outrageous. And I call on the superintendent and the chair to resign immediately, because every generation of Wellington's residents have died to protect our freedoms, and you want to take them away in the name of protecting your policies. The only policy we have in Wellington is public transparency and public participation, and I suggest we return to it. Thank you.
Okay, are there others present to speak? I see someone, the name on the bottom says Kylie. I'm not sure if that's you're in support of the previous comments or if you're raising your hand to speak.
Hi there, this is Kylie. 321.
Kylie, can you give us your first and last name, please?
Yep,
And your
Kylie
address?
Foltz, 321 Talent Turnpike. I
Thank
just
you.
want to thank you guys for all that you're doing on this board. I know it's all in the best interest of the kids. And I know it's not easy. And it's almost 10 o'clock at night and everyone's still here doing what they can to make sure things are done correctly. And just, I appreciate all of you. So I'm glad you're here to hear everyone. And I appreciate you guys all so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Others, or are we at the end? I don't see any more hands being waved. Okay, so we will move to board comment. Feel free to jump in. Herb? Go ahead, Herb.
Yeah, just a couple of quick ones. Want to thank the citizens for participating in our President Speak. Also, I want to thank the superintendent for putting the budget together. And hopefully we can go to the Board of Finance as a support group for him. And our budget gets passed. Also, without question, Aaron gave us a very fine presentation this evening on the curriculum, and I appreciate that. I hope to see hard copies of the material that she presented tonight. It's late, and I'm not going to add any more than that.
Okay, thank you, Herb. Laura, I see your hand.
I say it's late, and Herb, you just said everything I wanted to say. So definitely want to thank all the folks that have come out. This is wonderful participation from our community. And I'm not going to restate everything that you said, but you've hit every point I wanted. So thank you.
Anne? Oh, Anne, you're on mute. So sorry.
Sorry to take so long. I want to thank our two IAs who have just moved on to other experiences, and I want to wish them luck. And I also want to welcome Danielle to our special ed department. And I want to say I'm glad we're waiting to make that decision about masks until we have all the possible data that we can use to make that decision. Thank you.
Brianna?
Two quick things. We talked about our minutes a whole lot tonight, and I know that that's a really challenging and super important job. So I just want to thank our recording secretary and all recording secretaries for flexibility and perseverance, especially as we're working out some of these kinks. And yes, thank you, Phil, so much for putting together all of that information regarding our budget. I want to extend the thanks to Mary Kay, Lisa, Marcia, Aaron, and Donna there in the business office, because it certainly takes a whole group of you to get something like that done. So thanks to everybody, and I'm looking forward to that passing as well.
Thanks. Tracy or Donna?
I just want to thank everybody that came and spoke tonight. And I believe that's all I need to say.
Thanks. Tracy?
I think everything's been said.
That's the joy of going last. Okay, so I think with no further ado, I will take a motion to adjourn. Herb, you're on mute, so I saw your hand, but didn't hear anything.
Thank you. I move we adjourn.
I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor of adjourning the meeting signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Abstention? Nay? One thing passed uniformly. We're good. Okay, the meeting is so adjourned.
Good night.
Night, everybody.
Good night.